Boy, Resident Evil 4 was a good game, wasn't it? Genuinely, it was a landmark game of its time and a herald for basically the entire next generation of games, but when I said it was a good game industry on all those several hundred occasions, I kind of still wanted you to make other kinds of games as well. I feel like I showed up to the company picnic and everyone brought Branston Pickle. Yes, I like Branston Pickle, but without a nice sharp cheese sandwich to pair it with and possibly a Mars bar for dessert, it's only so much seasoned vegetable jam. The point I'm moseying towards with very little urgency is, why does it seem like AAA narrative games now only ever use one of two camera systems, first person or Resident Evil 4 style third person, as in aimed at the character's back with the dude roughly 1/3 of the way across the screen, cut off at around thigh level? Is this some industry-wide phobia of having to depict the main character's feet? Well, I was joking, but thinking about it, one of the quickest ways to lose immersion is to pay attention to how a video game character's feet and legs are interacting with stairs or awkward terrain, so perhaps this felt like the neatest solution. Why is it called a third-person perspective, Yahtzee? I'm glad you asked, Timmy. A first-person view is when the camera is literally the point of view of the main character, that is, the first person a game needs to concern itself with. Third person is therefore the point of view of an imaginary individual floating near the player character and watching what they do, like a creepy ghost. But then what would be the second person, Yahtzee? Well, Timmy, in this context, I suppose the second person would be whoever or whatever the player character is interacting with, whether that be NPCs, enemies, or just objects in the world. And a game with a second person perspective would therefore be a game where we see out of the perspective of the enemies. And nobody does that, except for the Forbidden Siren games, and they kinda suck. I think I first realised AAA games had a problem at the time of God of War 4. I rather enjoyed God of War 1 on the PS2 and its sequels to a lesser extent, and those were all about the fixed camera palooza. The focus was as much on the spectacular environments and monsters as on the protagonist, Kratos, and moved and angled differently scene by scene based on what was important at the time. Sometimes you'd mainly be looking at the approach to a huge impressive Greek temple, while Kratos was this tiny white thing running towards it in the bottom left like a spider on a bath plug chain. So when God of War 4 starts and the camera promptly squats behind Kratos like a coprophiliac gnome, so we have to look past Kratos' bum to see everything in the world and it's all subconsciously infected with the smell of farts, it didn't feel like God of War anymore. Yes, it also didn't feel like the established God of War because the setting and general tone were completely different, and Kratos had a big beard now, but the camera was a big part of it. Any cinematographer will tell you that the way you position and angle the camera has a big effect on the feel of a scene. It is an inescapable part of visual presentation because without the camera, nothing can be presented at all. Low shots make the subject look big and powerful, high shots make them seem smaller and more imposed upon, Dutch angles make everything feel weird. So when the character is locked into a permanent mid shot, that's exactly how everything feels. Permanently mid. What is being said about a character depicted from this angle in the language of cinematography, besides the fact that they believe you'll enjoy looking at their bum? Well, it conveys that character as powerful, important, self-confident, perhaps a touch obstinate, but the fact that they're off-center conveys that you're supposed to be more interested in what they're looking at, which is obviously the point in a video game context. But the RE4-style bum-pinned camera is basically a first-person camera that's taken a couple of steps back. It follows the player character's movements one-to-one, and the feel created by that is that they're more an extension of the player than an entity in themselves, the same way one feels about the gun and length of arm that is visible on screen in a first-person shooter. And efficient as that may be, is that always what you want to convey? When every game uses this style of camera, every game has the same feel, and I thought it might be worth discussing other options for third-person cameras that we don't seem to see so much of these days, and what kinds of games they might better suit. The old God of War fixed camera, for example, while it was hanging around up on the ceiling, did a good job at emphasizing what a small thing Kratos was compared to the army of massive mythological bastards he was up against. It also made it a lot harder to get lost and turned around in the samey streets of Athens, because the camera was always pointed in the same direction. And while the ability to get lost is no bad thing in a game about exploration and discovery, not so much when the emphasis is more on going from one arena battle to the next. Speaking of the gameplay benefit, the most notable advantage of a camera keeping some distance away from the player is that you can see all the things going on around them, even things they're not directly looking at, which again gives a much clearer sense of the stakes for Kratos when we can see the full extent of all the bastards surrounding him, and secondly lets us know the bastards are there, so we can hit them with something. The God of War 4 camera had to compensate for this lack by adding floating arrows around Kratos to let you know there are dudes behind him, and when there's a lot of dudes around him, he looks like he's wearing a colourful magic tutu. Still doesn't feel like a more elegant solution than just pulling the camera back a bit. Now let's consider fixed cameras as they were always traditionally used in survival horror games. I said back when I was complaining about the Silent Hill 2 remake that the slightly awkward lazy chase the camera in the original game used was more effective at creating a sense of distance and otherness between us and the protagonist. I mentioned how it's a shame the Silent Hill 2 make, the Resident Evil 2 make, and the Resident Evil 4 make all used the exact same bum camera, even though the original versions of all those games had distinctly different feels. With the fixed cameras in the original Resident Evil 2, you often couldn't see what Leon Kennedy was seeing. You might be able to hear zombies, but they'd be off screen or behind a wall, and Leon had no way to communicate that to you until you moved far far enough to make the camera change and discover you're about 6 inches from snarly death. And this creates a distinct dynamic between the player and Leon. It's less one-to-one control and more like you're trying to keep a helpless person safe, which connects to Leon's characterization in that game as an insecure rookie. In the remake, the bum camera ensures that inherent dynamic is lost. Am I saying the original camera system was better? Fuck no. I happen to think the RE2 make is the far superior game. The point is, the camera change did make it feel very different, which surely compromises its worth as a remake. It's the fact that there aren't enough AAA games that feel different to each other that's the problem I'm laying out here, and I really think them all using the same camera styles is a significant part of that. It all goes towards my distinct sense that AAA games, and indeed a lot of stuff on the most expensive end of entertainment media, like Hollywood superhero movies, feel like they're created from templates, like IKEA flat-packed furniture. Doubtless reducing such things to a bureaucratic process that can be followed universally makes these multi-billion-dollar 300-person design team projects a lot easier to wrangle, but that's at the expense of them having some individual character. I think of James Gunn's work in the DC universe, where he's clearly trying to make these fun, quirky, idea-driven superhero movies, but there's apparently some kind of doctrine in place where they all have to feature some mindless, heavily CGified, spectacular superhero fight that's inevitably the dreariest part of the film. Yes, let's all complain about big money in the arts again. I have no real idea for how one unpicks that particular mess, but I do believe the process begins in little specific ways, and here's the one I'm choosing to highlight today. Let's maybe think about doing something different with the camera once in a while. How about we start there? Then next year we can work on not putting a skill tree in every fucking game, and the year after that we can all buy AK-47s.
This video is brought to you by Poly Armory High Caliber Love, the world's only fully loaded conspiracy theorist gun nut dating simulation. Free to play right now on Steam.
These woke liberal elites are coming right now to take your guns. Do you love your guns? I mean, do you really love your guns?
Don't be scared. I can take it. Oh God, I can take it.